Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller returns, hosting. And Bill Raker returns, guesting.
Hello, Alan.
Bill, who's the president CEO of U.S. Federal Credit Union and their 9 locations around the Twin Cities. Welcome back. Also, our very original sponsor, going back a decade, for which we are much beholden. And welcome back.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's always a pleasure to be here on your show. I was just wondering this afternoon, how many years you've been hosting Access to Democracy, and how many shows you actually got produced?
Well, we have over 1,600, someplace between 1,600 and 1,700 shows. We started in 2000, so we're in our 15th year. There are some people who say we started earlier than that, but we don't have the record of it, really. When we moved from the other studio to this studio, we lost a lot of the records. So,
well, that's a great record. Most TV shows don't make 15 years.
And most CEOs of credit unions don't get acknowledged with a very prestigious national award just 3 days ago. So tell us about that.
Well, thank you for asking. The Trade Association of Credit Unions here in Minnesota nominated me for a position in the Hall of Leaders in the Credit Union House in Washington, D.C. So in a few days there'll be a plaque on the wall with my name on it, and I understand I get to bring home a plaque that I can put on my wall at home. So.
And that's a very prestigious thing.
It is, yes, I'm very honored.
There are very few people who have attained that status.
Indeed, very few, and most of them are retired from their professional careers before they receive it, but I fell into a very rare category of still being employed and receiving that honor.
That doesn't mean they're trying to push you out the door, though, does it?
I hope not.
Oh, okay.
They'll have some pushing to do.
So what's new in banking? And we know that credit unions are owned by the depositors. And we know that in the crash of 2008, credit unions sat like a bulwark against all these banks that were going down. So tell us why.
Well, as you indicated, there's a difference, significant difference between credit unions and banks. Banks are owned by their stockholders and are operated for the profits of the investors. Credit unions, on the other hand, are owned by their members. So we're a financial cooperative, and as such, we're a nonprofit type of operation. And that gives us the ability to return greater value and better service and better rates to our members. We're also a democratically controlled organization where our members vote. Each member has one vote, irrespective of the size of the financial relationship that they have with the cooperative, for the election of our directors, who are really volunteers.
And of course, that one vote would be akin to each state having a member of the House of Representatives, but moreover, a senator. Every state has 2 senators, no matter if they have 500,000 or 15 million,
Somewhat analogous
Yeah.
to that ratio, yes, yes.
which is a true democracy.
And in the recession, as you referred to, the credit unions across the country, 6,700 of them, some state chartered, some federally chartered, weathered that storm fairly well, and without taking any support or any deposits from the federal government, from the Treasury. As cooperatives, we did it on our own. We stood together with each other and weathered it very well.
So what is it that a bank can do that a cooperative can't do?
Well, as a cooperative, we have limited fields of membership that are defined by our regulators, whether it's the state regulator or the National Credit Union Administration that regulates federally chartered credit unions, so that we're not open to the public as a bank might be. Anyone can walk off the street and walk into a bank and become a customer of the bank. But a credit union can only serve those people in its field of membership. U.S. Federal, as an example, our field of membership is anyone who lives, works, worships, or goes to school or volunteers in the 7 counties around the Twin Cities. That's a pretty broad field of membership, but it is, as you can see, quite limited.
So in those 7 counties, you have 9 different operations.
We have 9 retail
Locations,
branches. Yes,
right.
we have 9 retail branches in that geography. Banks are able to raise capital in a variety of different ways. Credit unions, on the other hand, have just one way to raise capital, and that's through our retained earnings. Credit unions are limited in the interest rate that they can charge by legislation, regulation. Banks have some limits as well, but they're much higher than what credit unions have. We also have limitations or caps on the kinds of loans and the amounts of loans that we can make in the commercial arena. So there are some significant differences in the ownership, the governance, and the operations of credit unions and banks.
That really works to the protection of the depositor, though, as we learned during the recession of 2008, when so many banks went down or went under, or where a receiver stepped in to take over that bank.
Yes, and I should point out that protecting the depositor is something that pertains to credit unions as well. The National Credit Share Insurance Fund is analogous to the FDIC insurance fund that protects or guarantees the deposits in banks, and deposits in credit unions are assured by a similar kind of fund backed by the U.S. government.
So how did these banks get into such trouble? What was it that they did irresponsibly that created the crisis and actually the recession?
Well, it wasn't just the banks all on their own. There were lots of parties involved that contributed to what happened in the recession. And there are different theories, different schools of thought about what really happened. But I think 2 main things contributed to it. One was the mortgages that were readily available to people who did not have to verify even that they were employed and had any income, let alone the ability to repay a mortgage. And that was pretty much predicated on the idea that the value of a home would always go up, that it would never go down. And we saw that that theory was blown out of the water as well. And the other, one of the other things was a number of different very risky investments that banks participated in that credit unions did not, that contributed to the collapse almost the collapse of the financial system in this country. Fortunately, it didn't reach depression stages, but it was pretty serious, and we're coming out of it. Particularly here in Minnesota, things are looking pretty good. Our unemployment rate is down below where it was before the recession. The value of homes is starting to come back, is continuing to rise, and that's all good news for the economy here in Minnesota and for the consumers and our credit union members.
Now, one of the biggest problems that's facing us as a society today are these cybersecurity attacks. As a matter of fact, I saw on the news 2 nights ago on a national news program the fact that there was a gang that hit ATMs by hacking numbers, and they got $38 million out of New York City, out of 200 ATMs, in a 3-hour period, one night. Obviously, we are in great danger of having people hack into our lives. Our privacy is attacked. Let's talk about cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity makes us want to go back to the days when when they robbed stagecoaches and trains, and now it's all about hacking into data systems and getting information about the consumer or the financial institution and using that in a criminal way. Yeah, in 2014 there were over 500 breaches of data warehouses or databases that affected over 18 million consumer financial accounts. And 80% of the people whose accounts were compromised didn't even know it until the organization that had its database compromised or the issuer of the debit card or credit card contacted them and told them about it.
Target right here in Minnesota is a prime example of that.
That's one example. Home Depot was another example. Michael's. I mean, there are 510 of them in the United States. So it's a serious problem, and it's a growing problem. And what I would like to admonish consumers to do is to pay very close attention to how they use their credit cards and their debit cards, and what they do when they access the internet. You know, when we go on the internet, we're naked to the world. Everything that we do out there through the computer is going to stay out there forever, and hackers can get into that information and use it. Some of the things that a person should definitely protect, because they are the access to the person's ID, Social Security number. Be very, very careful of where you use your Social Security number and what you use it for. That's really the key to protecting your ID. And there is a difference between compromised debit cards and credit cards and real ID theft. For example, the financial institution that issues the consumer the credit card or the debit card really bears the brunt of the risk and the responsibility if there are any losses or fraudulent uses of those cards, provided that the card owner notifies the financial institution within a specified period of time. And it's pretty much limited to that. However, if one's ID truly is stolen and used in a criminal fashion, I'm talking about your Social Security number, your birth date, even your telephone number, your address, mother's maiden name, all of the kinds of things that are used to identify a person. If that really is stolen and used in a criminal fashion, and there are all sorts of things that one can do when they get a hold of your ID, like take out a huge mortgage, buy a big fancy automobile, there is no way that the consumer who has been compromised can recover that. That's totally their liability. So that's a pretty exposed area.
And how do you protect yourself?
There are many ways to protect yourself. As I was saying earlier, be very careful about how your Social Security number is used, your telephone number, your address, all of those things. Sometimes when you're in a retail store, the cashier may ask for a phone number, or they may ask for a zip code. The consumer is under no obligation to provide that information to the retailer. They're simply gathering that information to use it in a marketing way. So I recommend to just politely refuse to give that information, as an example. On the internet, if you're on the internet and you receive an email from someone you don't know, do not open any attachments to that email. Do not click on any links in emails from people or organizations that you do not know. use a firewall, use an antivirus protection. There's a lot of fraud going on in that area. As an example, I've had this happen to me a couple of times in the last month or so, where I get a phone call at home saying my computer files are too large. They need to be reorganized, and they're willing to help me if I give them some information about my computer and a credit card that they can charge. Well, I know that that's fraud, because that person on the phone has no idea that I even have a computer, so how would they know anything about it? Be very careful about that. There's another thing going on in the computer world where malware viruses are installed on a person's computer, and the message comes up that your files are locked, and unless you pay a ransom, you'll never be able to get into your files again. That can be very serious, and unless you have a very effective firewall and a very effective antivirus and computer security software running on your computer, that actually could happen. So be very cautious about those. There are other fraudulent schemes out there that these criminals use to gather information about folks. Some of them you've probably read about or you've heard about. One is the grandparent receives a call from someone claiming to be a niece or a nephew or a grandchild, and saying that they need financial assistance, and please would you wire some money someplace. Those are scams. Lottery scams. You get an email or a letter in the mail saying you just won the lottery in Jamaica, and you say, I've never been to Jamaica and I didn't buy any lottery tickets there. How did I win that? There's a movie out, in fact, about someone who called Nebraska, I think is the name of the movie, where this fellow believes he's won this lottery, and all of the changes that it brings about in his life and in the life of his friends. I would encourage anyone who has been a victim of any of these scams, or if you know anyone who's been a victim of these scams, to call a fraud hotline number. And
we have that number,
yes,
don't
we have the number. It's on the screen right now.
Good.
It's 1-855-303-9470. 1-855-303-9470. This is a national fraud hotline, and if you are a victim, know anyone who's been a victim, or suspect that you're a victim, call the hotline, give them the information, and help us take better control of our privacy and our personal information.
Is it safe to say that a bank will almost never make a phone call to your home and ask for any of that personal information?
It absolutely is. Our credit union doesn't do it, and I don't know of any financial institution that would call up a consumer and say, I need you to verify some information for me. We've had an issue with our data processing system, and I want to make sure that we have your correct credit card or your correct debit card on file, and that your password with us is secure. Right there is a clue that they're just trying to get your private information, and they are not from the financial institution. They're not from the IRS. Sometimes people will get calls from the IRS saying that they owe the IRS money, and to go to a store and buy a prepaid card and call them on the phone and give them the number on the card, and away they go. Here's a fraud that we've had happen at our financial institution, and I'm sure it's relatively common, where the consumer has bought something or has put something up for sale on the internet, on eBay or Craigslist or something like that. And someone calls and says, I want to buy the motorcycle that you have listed out there, and your price tag is $5,000 for the motorcycle. So, okay, so we'll strike a deal. I'll give you $5,000 for it, but I'm going to send you a dividend check that I just got from the company that I have this investment in, and the check is for like $12,000. So I'll send you the check. You take it to the financial institution, deposit the check, and wire me the $7,000. Keep your $5,000, wire me the $7,000, and ship me the motorcycle. And people fall for this all the time. They take the check to the credit union, to the bank, they cash it, They wire the money to this other person. They ship off the motorcycle, and in 5 or 6, 7, 10 days, the check comes back as being a fraudulent check. And it's
So they're out the motorcycle.
they're out the
and money.
motorcycle and the money. Yes, that happens quite frequently.
I had a call about a month ago from a gentleman. He purported to be a deputy in Ramsey County, and he said, "We have a warrant out for you because you didn't show up in court to pay your traffic fine." And he gave me a date that I was supposedly in St. Paul and went through a traffic light and said I was given a court date. I didn't show, so they issued a warrant to me. And if I didn't come up with $300 immediately, they were going to, they already had put a lock on my license. My license was no longer valid, and I had to come up with this money immediately. What happens that Sheriff Tim Leslie was just on the show at the same time, the Dakota County Sheriff, and I called Tim and he said, "Oh, they got you too?" And he said, "Give me the number right away." And he called Ramsey County and they followed up on it. But you know, you initially are saying, well, I could have gone through a light where they took my number down, but I got into a discussion with this guy about due process and warrants and things like that, and he didn't know what I was talking about. And I knew that it was a fraud. But how easy it is for somebody to fall for that.
Oh, absolutely. The fraudsters, the criminals, there's no end to their creativity and the kinds of schemes that they can come up with, and their persistence. And initially they sound, if you're on the phone with them, they sound legitimate. But if you start questioning them and you start pushing them, then you begin to identify the red flags that put you on alert and say, I'm not sure that this is really
they'll
legitimate.
give you a number to call back, and it's a number that's been hacked. It's actually somebody's number, and they have somehow or other, I don't know how they do it, they hack that number, and you're calling a number which is purportedly legitimate, and it is not. And it's really troubling that there's people who spend all their time figuring ways to cheat you out of your own money.
That is so sad. We encourage our members at the credit union to set up special kinds of passwords or identification questions, security questions on their accounts, so that there's double protection to keep the hackers out. Once someone hacks into your computer, they have access to all of the information that's on that computer. And if you've been using the computer to do internet banking with your financial institution, your account numbers, your passwords, your security code answers are all in there, and they can get them
Before you realize it.
before you know what's going on. Absolutely.
What about changing passwords frequently?
Well, we highly recommend that. In fact, all of our employees at our credit union are required to change their internal passwords every 90 days. And there are systems for setting up what are called highly secured passwords versus passwords that have virtually no security on them. If you use a word that's in the dictionary, the hacker's going to be able to break through that.
Same as if you use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something like that.
Absolutely a terrible password. And the word password is a bad password, but a lot of people use that. Here's what we recommend: that a password be at least 6 characters, preferably 8 characters or more long, that there's a combination of uppercase and lowercase letters, that there's at least one numerical symbol in the set, and at least one special character, like an asterisk sign or a plus sign or an equal sign or something like that. Any combination of those things works pretty well as a secure password.
Now, I was going to share my password with you now, but I don't think I will.
Write it right here if you would, please. Yeah. No, never, ever share your password.
What about the new credit cards that are coming out? People were managing to hop onto credit cards, and now there's a new credit card. I know we just used it in Europe, where I had my local credit cards changed and they put a disc or they put something in the credit card.
It's a chip. It's called a chip card, and it's actually a little computer. This isn't new technology. It's been in use in Europe and Asia and Canada for several years, but it is relatively new to the United States. It's called an EMV chip. It stands for EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa. And in that chip is the information that identifies the user. It replaces really what's in the magnetic strip, typically of the card. And it's much more secure than the magnetic strip, but it isn't 100% secure because it doesn't work when the transaction is card not present. In other words, if you're doing a transaction over the telephone or on the internet, there's no way that there's a device to read that what's in that chip. So you have to give them the number, and once you give them the number and the expiration date and sometimes the CVV code, then that information is exposed. What's interesting about the EMV card and that technology is that it is being rapidly implemented here in the United States. Come October 15th of this year, every element of the transaction chain needs to be EMV compliant, meaning that the financial institution that issues the card has to issue EMV cards, and the merchant that takes the card has to have the capability of reading the card, and then the network that those transactions ride on have to be compliant as well. If not, then the liability defaults to the weakest link in that chain. And there is some suspicion that the weakest link is likely to be at the retailer or place of business where the transaction is going to be initiated.
Well, that's got to be a tremendous expense for, say, the bank to reissue all these cards with the EMV chip in it.
We will eventually have to reissue in excess of 60,000 cards, and there is expense, absolutely, dealing with that.
And that's borne by the institution.
It is, yes.
So that certainly, as in the Target transaction where they bore all the losses to their people, in this case, to make people safer, you have to bear the loss.
Well,
the
Target
cost.
didn't really lose anything. All of the fraudulent uses of any of that data reverted back to the card issuer. Target, it didn't cost Target any money from a loss standpoint. It cost them a lot of money from a reputation standpoint.
And a lot of angry people.
That's right. That's what's at risk with the retailer, their reputation.
So much to talk about, and we've covered some really, really what I think are important issues here today. We've been talking with Bill Raker, who's the president and CEO of U.S. Federal Credit Union, and just recognized nationally as one of the top credit union executives in the country. Always a pleasure, and certainly come back again, because these are issues that are really important to all of us, and I thank you.
They are, Alan, and we'd love to talk to you some more. Thanks.